did that on purpose. Welcome to I can't talk. David, this whole live thing, it's killing me. Welcome to Perfect Pitch Live, the show where if you mess up, you cannot edit it out. So anyway, okay, this is a live spin-off of our normal podcast show, Perfect Pitch, which was created to help industry PR pros, media, marketing people, basically learn better tips for working together and getting rid of bad practices, up in our game when it comes to best practices, and sharing our thoughts there. So we basically created this so that, one, we incorporated a cool live element, and two, we're able to show the faces of some of the people who have been on our podcast, which today's guest has been. So I think you are the first double person that we have ever had. So welcome.
I'd like to think of myself as a cross-media star. So.
And he looks so handsome on camera, so we had to make sure he was a guest here. But just to intro properly, this is David Bloom, who is an award-winning journalist and communications strategist. He is a columnist now for Tube Filter and TV Rev, where he writes about the collision between technology, entertainment, and media, which is so prevalent. He has this amazing, extensive bio, which, I mean, I'm just going to name off a few places where he's been and worked. Deadline Hollywood, Variety, MGM, and he's also done a lot of work with the USC Marshall School of Business and also NRPR Group. So David is a dear friend, a true professional, an awesome, awesome writer. And David, I'm going to let you brag about yourself a little bit.
Oh, well, there's not much to say. I mean, I've been around a long time, and I've been on both sides of the aisle, as it were, both as a journalist for 20 years, and more than 20 years, and as a PR executive at USC Marshall as Associate Dean, Chief Communications Officer at MGM as a VP of Corporate Communications, advising the redevelopment agency of the City of LA, done a lot of consulting with a lot of large companies. So I've been around. I have earned my white hair.
It's distinguished. We like it. We definitely like it.
I'm distinguished by my distinguished white hair, so
there
I appreciate that.
Well, David, right before we went live, we were actually in the middle of a little mini discussion about, what's the goal of Perfect Pitch? Why do I do this? And why did we, whatever? And, everyone, I let David know that really when it comes down to it, for selfish reasons, as an agency owner, I have to hire really great PR professionals in order to keep my agency going and keep our clients happy, but also our media friends happy and engaged and all that stuff too. Because I say it all the time, without the media, PR would not have jobs. Like, we would not be in business, right? We would just be social media companies or whatever. That is, what makes us tick, and you guys are our lifeline, and we need to think of ourselves as more of a resource to you rather than this is them and this is us, and we're separate. At the end of the day, sitting and working with journalists on what you want is a win-win, both for our clients, for you. So I think that if more PR professionals, even professionals who are practicing now, it's never too late to get rid of bad practices, right? And if you're young and you're just starting, we want to motivate you to do it the right way, because there are right and wrong ways to do things, right? So starting with that, David, you were talking about some really great tools that you said, if used correctly, can actually unleash some of this stuff. So so go into to detail.
Well, I think that one of the things that I often talk about is people who have been in PR even for a few years. The things that they were taught in school are wildly out of date. And it's the same thing in journalism. I mean, we are all creating now on multiple platforms, reaching audiences in a wide variety of ways. I think it's also important to talk about some of the context within which PR is operating in terms of how journalism is doing. Cision, the big database about journalists, says there are now 5 PR professionals for every professional journalist in America. Now, that means that journalists are getting hammered. They also threw out a number that they receive somewhere, a typical one receives between 50 and 500 cold email pitches a day. Now, that's an ocean of stuff to swim through before you get to the things you have to do. You're on deadline all the time. You are writing all the time. You are chasing everybody else's stuff that's also out there. And then somebody calls out of the blue and says, hey, I got this great story. Maybe you do, but how does the journalist have time to exhale long enough to say, yeah, that one? So there's a lot of challenges here, and part of what I think is important is sort of rejiggering the way we think about what PR is, with journalists, overstretched, underfunded, fewer bodies than ever, more expectations and demands than ever. They're going to get to X number of stories a day or a week. If you're working with a client, you've got to figure other ways to tell that client's story on the PR side, and I think that I've tried to urge people that I have dealt with and consulted with that you need to think of yourself as a storyteller, as somebody who understands the narrative, the big strategic narrative about what your company's doing, and figures out how every bit that you do builds toward that narrative, but also how you do that more than writing a news release, handing it to 3 journalists and saying, my work is done.
Right.
So, we've got social media, and lots of people, I go into a room with 10 young PR, account executives and assistants, all the people that are a tenth my age. Here is Rumpelstiltskin.
Stop.
And, you ask them, do you guys do social media, for instance, for your clients? And they go, no, not that much, but do you do social? Oh, yeah, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Snapchat, particularly if they're really young. They're on Facebook.
I'm on Snapchat and I'm not really young.
Yes, well,
we love Snapchat.
You are unique now that you're 23. But
we're going to leave it at that. Yeah,
we'll leave it at that. 23 is good.
Right.
But the reality is that they do that stuff all the time to tell their story.
Yeah.
But how are you telling the story for your client? And so that's just one significant example. I mean, the idea that when you put out a news release, that thing needs to be well written, but it needs to be written more like a news story, because the reality is it's going to go out on a PR wire probably. It's going to get found by a bunch of somewhat semi-automated outlets, and they're going to run it. That's going to be the news story.
Right.
For a lot of people that are going to run across stuff about your client. So it needs to be written well. It needs to have a search
the
engine.
W's.
Well, it's got to have all that. Yeah,
right.
all that basic stuff
right.
that everybody learns in the first year of journalism/PR, whatever classes they're taking.
I think more CEOs need to learn that, because those are the ones that before they go out, that's the hard part. And I love my clients. Actually, I'm so lucky to have so many of them that are just awesome and listen to what we say. But I've worked with either CMOs or even CEOs, and in that process, we forget they have to bless it, and they look at it and they're like, but this doesn't have the massive headline that I want, this doesn't have the this and that, and I'm like, this needs to be written for media,
right.
who are then going to take that, translate it, and make that story their own. This is why the power of the pitch is so important, and why we should go directly, same news release, different angles, different pitches, all the resources. It's a resource. And oftentimes, great press releases can turn bad when in the hands of the wrong CEO.
Right. Well, that's the whole idea about too many cooks in the kitchen,
yep.
right? And obviously the CEO was writing the check, so
So you gotta balance that out.
Her decision is semi-final, but
right.
You've still got to talk. So look, it's got to work with search engines, so it's got to have the right keywords. When you tell a story, it's got to tell it clearly. When you've got the URL and all that stuff, when you've got a lead paragraph that's incomprehensible. I was talking with a relatively senior PR person a few days ago, and she was talking about how her former employer always for SEO wanted to get 5 different things into the lead, and it's like, if you have 5 different really important things, then you don't have anything that's important, and all you do is confuse search engines, and your stuff doesn't get found. So who wins on that one? So you got to start building some skills here. I mean, learning to do live broadcasts, learning to do audio podcasts. To your credit, you're even doing this stuff because you're thinking about how do we tell stories for your firm for a specific purpose that you have. But that also has value if you start to do those things with clients, if you start to use those things as ways to extend their reach and their ability to tell their stories. And I think that those are a set of tools that are now in our pocket, and we have to use them. We have to learn, and if you don't know how to use them, it's a really good time to try, because other people are learning too.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think that when the PR people also take the time to be on the other side of the fence and learn it, right? We have to think about scheduling. We have to think about guests and production, all of the details that go into it. And I think with us being very like tactile learners, then we're in the shoes of the podcasts and blogs and vlogs and all of that we're pitching. We understand that they have a schedule. We understand that they're under a lot of pressure. We understand that they need the bios of the guests that we're trying to pitch, right? So it's like we're getting that same practice. We can then be empathetic about it, right? And understand what they're up against. And then even be able to take that back to our clients and say, look, we've pitched them. They book 90 days out. It's not, what do you mean I can't be on tomorrow? Oh, they're just sitting around just waiting for us to email. No, they're getting 500 emails a day, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's really useful to understand. I mean, having those numbers, just decision numbers about all those cold pitches makes you understand that maybe another cold pitch isn't the best idea. You know, the best PR folks are people that do build relationships. That's what you're getting paid a lot of money for, is the relationships you build with reporters who trust you to have correct information, to not lie, to be prompt in your responses when we have follow-up questions, and make sure we get the resources we need. As you know, you're the interface and the representative for that client, but that agency has to be able to make things possible for the journalist, and it's more important than ever now, given the state of what's left of my beloved long-time profession. So there's a role here on both sides, and journalists, you know, need to be less jerky, but you know, they're under a lot of stress, and the pay's not getting better, and the hours aren't getting better. I talk about my time at Deadline. One of the biggest stories I had, one of the ones that got read by more people than anything, I wrote on my cell phone on Christmas Eve at 9 o'clock.
Wow.
And it got a good URL, and it was about an online hack of the Sony online network, that the gamer network for the PlayStation. And everybody woke up the next day, wanted to plug in their PlayStation, couldn't play, went online to figure out what was going on, and my story said it's down, and the next day it was down, and the next day it was down, and finally it wasn't down anymore. But 1 million people went to go read that story. Yeah. But that story got written, again, in the most ad hoc of ways, on a cell phone. That's the reality for journalists now. Yeah. So how do you, as a PR professional, work with people to help them get their story done at whatever time it is, wherever they are, in whatever setting that they're doing? They're not necessarily sitting in baronial splendor on their country estate.
Oh, I can't wait for someone to give me a great story.
Just hand me this Pulitzer Prize with along with my turkey dressing.
Oh, you're
dressing.
not?
Yes. So
oh my God.
It's not kind of how it works anymore. It's a little hard scrabble. So you know, for the PR person, you've got to figure out how you have a role and where you come into things. So.
No, I love that point, and I think too. Again, if you are a young PR professional and you're excited about getting into this profession because you're looking at, oh well, those parties that I can go to, the, you know, rubbing elbows with all these amazing people, and I can do this and this and that, that's like a little tiny part of it. The rest of it is a lot of hard work. And, you know, the point that you brought up about if a journalist is writing and it's 1 o'clock in the morning and they have to hit that deadline or whatever, I can remember specifically knowing that I've pitched someone, sometimes they're waiting on assets from my client. And I'm like, come on, give me the pictures, give me the images, give me the video, whatever it is. I think the last time, Dean Takahashi, I just adore him.
I worked with Dean at a couple different places. Yeah,
just love Dean.
Dean and I go back a long time.
That I remember, it's like, okay, he's super busy. I mean, he's just knocking out
Dean will get on Facebook and talk about, I wrote 12 stories today. It's like, Dean, you're a machine, but you're insane.
A monster, in a good way. Dean, we love you.
He's a journalism monster.
Totally. So I remember it was like 10 or 11, and one of my clients, I want to say it was like Help Shift at the time, we needed to get him an image, and I'm like, please, come on, guys, and the story was going to run in a couple of hours, but look, I knew what I needed to do to get Dean anything that he needed in order for that story to get done, and I stayed up. I stayed up at night. Sometimes we sacrifice sleep, but that lack of sleep and that going the extra mile and making sure that our media friends get what they need, I mean, Dean, he's a homie, man. Like, he's a homie.
Well, he can trust you to take care of your end, so he can get, I mean, for him to be a machine, he needs to have inputs.
Right, there you go.
To get outputs. So you've got to do your part on behalf of your clients to help him do the things that he needs to do.
Absolutely.
And it's it is a complicated process. It's not any simpler now. Just we have more ways to connect, more ways to share, more assets to provide though too. I mean, it's like now we need to have a big enough photo that's in a horizontal format that runs on that, but maybe we also need something we can put onto a mobile thing that's a different, in a different sizing, but it's also got to be web friendly. So that's like a dumb little set of technical things that you got to think about.
Totally,
right?
and be 2 steps ahead of. Right? So now we know, hey, anytime we are going to go and pitch, say, Dean a story or someone else, know what it is he does within his stories that, like, a lot of the times he needs a really solid sort of horizontal image, right, that tells the story without it looking like an advertisement for that brand or whatever. So, we know to be 2 steps ahead of that, but it's paying attention. It's, again, reading what our media friends are writing. So one, we know their voice, their tone, what they look for. They need a balance. Hey, we know that if you're going to write the story, you need a quote from someone else and maybe even a competitive whatever. We understand that, right? And that oftentimes you're going to find that in like a Wall Street Journal or even, Washington Post. We worked with Haley Tsukiyama, who wrote a great story about Heal, but she also needed to balance that out with getting other resources, and we had to understand that.
Right.
Right? So, anyway.
And Haley's very good too. I mean, I read her stuff all the time. But I think that's also important. I mean, again, we go back to these cold pitch things. I get a lot of stuff that's drove me nuts. U-Haul.
U-Haul?
By U-Haul openings in somewhere in Bergen County, New Jersey.
But what does that have to do with like tube? Was this when you were?
No, this is just in the last 4 months, and I sent them a couple of things saying, "Hey, you idiots, you're wasting my time and yours by clogging up my email box."
Are you guys coming up with a series about how all of these openings are changing the world and how you guys are like, those what is it like where they sell people's stuff? In the storages when they whatever. But
oh, right.
If there was some sort of
the
web
reality
series,
shows,
reality show, something
right,
fun
that would
and
be
crazy
something.
like that, right?
Sure.
We're going through and snooping through people's stuff when they put it on YouTube.
That would actually, I could see, but I think they did.
U-Haul, I want the credit if that series ever gets.
That's right. Yeah. Well, they don't have this. It's not like the storage spot, but I get your point. Yeah. But
that's right.
They just get the stuff moved there, and then it's an empty truck. But the point being that they just grabbed a name, put it on there, and on their mailing list and sent it off without paying attention. And all they did was get me annoyed at U-Haul, and I'm going to go. I'll go to Penske because I used to work for his son. But my point is that they didn't do themselves any favors with one person in media who is now taking a shot at their idiot corporate communications operation. Yeah. So that's an example of how you can actually hurt your client.
Totally.
If you're not thinking, if you're not figuring out who should we really be talking to, and how do we talk to them, and how do we get them the resources.
Right.
So. And
that goes back to seniors, senior people in PR. You're a corporate communications, like you're a CCO, you're a CMO, you're a whatever, a VP of corporate communications. That is our job.
Right.
Being seniors, we know better. We know better. We need
no
to be
senior
coaching.
Moments.
No. I might have a few.
Okay.
But my job, especially here, coach.
Right.
There is, if I find out that something like that happens and that someone's lazy, I say no lazy pitches, and you know what I mean. There are no lazy pitches that work at this company. It just doesn't happen. Lazy means you didn't do your homework. That means you're pitching David some crazy U-Haul story. Well, we don't represent U-Haul, but
that
pay
makes it
attention,
easy.
right? I would much rather see 10 solid pitches come out from an NRPR group email address a day than a blast of 300 to just hope that works.
Right.
It doesn't work.
I think rifle over shotgun is probably a way to think about this.
Ooh, I like that.
Snipers. Snipers instead of, I won't go into the gamer stuff, but I can totally do it,
Right.
That sort of focus thing, and again, that's where you have a relationship and you realize, okay, maybe this guy at this place isn't as the right person compared to this woman over here who's really got this particular area of focus and has shown an interest in this area in the past. So it's knowing a smaller group, being deeper in. I mean, I think that's very traditional PR, and then the next step is how do we use the new technologies to not only reach those folks in that traditional way, but then take that next step as storytellers and understand that we have access to tools, whether it's live video, whether it's social media, whether it's SEO, really smartly done, well-written news releases that go out on a broader wire to get seen in search engines so that thing surfaces. Understanding that those are all still telling stories. Maybe it's branded content, maybe it's thought leadership stuff and content marketing.
Right.
All those are opportunities that help your client, but you have to think of yourself as more than what PR people were 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Right.
When you were just a wee lass.
Yeah, when I was just born 5 years ago.
Yes.
I
Prodigy, yes.
totally agree. So, one topic of discussion that you actually brought up that you thought might be good was just some of the stuff that you actually do with PR firms, right? You've kind of been on both sides, right? When it comes to writing, creativity, building narratives, right? Not all PR agencies look at themselves as being responsible for doing things like that, which is unfortunate, right? Again, some of them are, well, we're just going to write this press release, get it out, maybe get a story or two, but no true strategy, no true narrative building, which I think, sometimes does a disservice to clients, right? You got to motivate them to also be a company that tells multiple stories so that it keeps them relevant, right?
Well, but I think there's a couple things. One, it's if you're a firm that is looking for a long-term relationship with a client, and not just we're going to jump in, jump out, 3 months in, do a quick thing, get a few media hits and then walk out the door. If you're in there for the long term, you are working with them and pushing them and making them think about, in a strategic, big picture way, what is the story of my company? Where are we taking this? How, or this product or this brand, what is that overarching story? And how does each piece that I put out build on that broader story? How does that fill in public understanding of who we are, our clients, our partners, our suppliers, our distributors? All those people need to understand what this means, and the customer. But how do you build that? What is that story? And I don't think that enough people are thinking beyond the next quarter or the next 6 months. What is that big narrative about this company and this brand, and how are you telling it? How does this piece in, and this piece in, and this piece in? And again, how do you get density around all those pieces to fill it in so you got a story that's consistent, that builds goodwill, that gives you some insulation if things go badly.
Right.
Sometimes things go badly, and you got to figure out Plan B. But if you got some goodwill, you can go from there.
I agree, and I think one point too that what you just said, we actually do have those deep conversations with our clients, and I think one of the easiest places, and this is a tip for PR pros out there, one of the easiest places to start is the mission and the vision. Because oftentimes a CEO and their marketing team will sit down and say, this is what we represent, this is who we are, this is what we're trying to do, and once we get there, the goal is for it to look like this. Well, a lot of good energy is usually put into that, and so you can get inspiration from their mission, vision, and then all the other stuff from the products and everything else become little bits and pieces so that the energy of that is what you build a lot of the narrative on. So just a tip. So we're going to get into the Q&A stuff, which is always fun. So we have a friend from Twitter. We really need to start putting their names in here. Unless they're all NRPR group people, then we know who you are. But okay, so this one is from Twitter, an anonymous user of Twitter. What do you see as the future of entertainment in 10 to 20 years?
I see, among other things, I see most of the studios owned by some of the tech giants.
Google.
Google may pick one up. I think that Apple has just hired 2 top guys at Sony TV to run their video initiatives. They've already got a giant subscription business with 35 million subscribers on Apple Music. They could pick up a toy. AT&T is buying Time Warner, that's a deal I'm almost certain will go through. It seems it's pretty much a done deal when you talk to people in terms of integrations that are already well along there. I can't imagine Verizon's going to sit there and let AT&T buy a studio without Verizon saying we need one too, and Yahoo was not enough of a meal for them.
It's just an appetizer.
And then, you know, Amazon, obviously, with Roy Price's departure, is going to have a bit of a setback here in terms of their energy. But, you know, they're buying lots and lots of movies. Netflix said they're going to buy 80, or they're going to put out 80 films next year. That's a stunning number. Insane. I don't think a single studio has ever done that. So most of these companies, Netflix is a little bit different, but most of these companies, unlike traditional media and entertainment companies, have something else that pays the bills, and this is a way to get you to use those other things. So they're well positioned to pick the traditional Hollywood studios up and put them in their back pockets.
Yeah.
So that's the big guys. Now, on the other side, we have hundreds of talented young people creating audiences, using new platforms to tell stories, new kinds of stories, very specialized stories, and they're the other side of what's happening on the topic. And then there's some other stuff hard to tell. So we know AR is going to be a big deal, augmented reality. We know that virtual reality will be more and more compelling, but won't be in the home in a notable way for a while. Those will be new kinds of entertainment experiences. It's fun to write about. I enjoy it a great deal. But in terms
you enjoy reading it?
But in terms of saying in 10 years it's going to be X, I think we will have a very different Hollywood, and we will have a whole lot of new creations. Many of them will also still be in LA because LA's kind of rocking.
Kind of cool.
They'll still be here. Digiday just had a story about all the video creators and companies that have come here, even though they aren't in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So that's what's still happening. There's still that stuff. LA's still got something to offer in talent and everything else.
Yeah, it's a good energy here. I mean, that's what brought me here. Not that Silicon Valley doesn't. I love Silicon Valley. It's my heart, where I'm from, where I'm like rooted, but I think that there's a different type of energy where a lot of this stuff is coming together, and for me, like wanting to stay at the forefront of everything, this was where I wanted to, plant my feet.
Different set of conversations, and that's
definitely
interesting. So.
And we only have a couple of minutes left, and I think you actually answered the second question in the first one too, because it touched on VR taking off, so thank you for being psychic. So before we end, where can people find and connect with you?
My old school Twitter handle is my name, @DavidBloom. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Snapchat.
You're on Snapchat, I'm going to find you. That's my favorite.
It's a very interesting. I actually think Snapchat is training the next generation, and I'll be writing about this, is training the next generation of audiences to consume news and other content in a vertical mobile way. So that Discover section is where the brands of news are going to be thriving. And if you're not on there, I think you're going to have some challenges.
This just in. Everybody listening. Literally, I was just quoted in a Forbes piece about it too. I'm like, you know what? Too many people are discounting it because they don't use it. Because they don't use it, they assume they know what it is, and it's not. But that Discover platform, I'm telling you that, and so many other features that Snap is
and they just did a deal with NBC, which is an investor, to start doing original programming. What does that programming look like? Well, that's a really great question. But I think that Gen Z connection, it's going to be 25% of the population. It's going to be huge. And they're going to be doing great. So I'm there. You can see me on TubeFilter. I write the Insights column. You go in there, and they have a tab for Insights. That's all my stuff. And then I write a wider variety of stuff about the convergence of different screens on TV Rev, and you can find my content there.
Love it. Okay. I don't know how many more minutes that we have. Maybe 3. Okay, so we have 3 minutes. You better answer this quickly. Just kidding. Okay, so from another Twitter user. Okay, we're both really active on Twitter. Okay. Do you have any tips or guidelines for someone in PR using Twitter for media connections? I will quickly just say it's the best place to build relationships with media, because oftentimes they're sharing their stuff on Twitter because, obviously you want to show off your great work, and it's an easy place to kind of, hey guys, here's this. So I'll look at that, read it. I have my little private list of media homies who I'll follow, go there deliberately to make sure that I'm reading their stuff. And then just comment, retweet. It shows that they're being paid attention to, and it's great for just relationship building in general. That was my quick answer.
I would suggest that, I think the lists are really useful, but if you want to know, it's a great headline service. So the folks that are in a sector that you care about, you get them lined up in a list, and they are posting most stuff, or their outlet has set up to auto post that stuff in one way or another, so you can track that and see what's going on. Quickly get to stuff. You can do quick competitive analysis of companies that are challenging your company and follow that in another kind of list. That's another way to use it in a very smart way. You can, but I think it's when you get clever about those things, you can really do some nice stuff. And in terms of dealing with the media, you're right. People like people paying attention. It's nice to know somebody's out there.
Yeah. Hello, Bueller? Anyway, yes, very good. Well, this has been a lot of fun, as always. David, it's so great to see you, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. I know you've got about 500 emails to delete of spam.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding. And a lot of great work to do. Looking forward to reading that Snapchat piece.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. Everyone, thank you for tuning in again to Perfect Pitch Live. We'll be back next month with another awesome guest, but twice a month, we already do our podcast too, so you can listen in there. But enjoy the rest of your week, and thanks for joining.